So these are images of enjoyment, of happiness, which are completely different and they belong to the traditional philosophy. And in a way they are present in it. Because the only thing I would object also is, if we desire enjoyment, you said enjoyment after, I understand perfectly what you mean, perfectly, so in your strategy I agree. But then if we desire enjoyment, it must be because we already have it. I don't agree with the conception of desire as being a lacking of something. If you desire happiness, it is because you already had it. You already know what it is, in a way. So it must be after, but also before.
Just in the about the first part of the question, I have emphasized that I take enjoyment in the Lacanian sense, in the French sense, jouissance. So it's not only enjoying in general, it's finally the power of the thing. And as you know, it's finally something in analogy, like the obscure power of the body of the mother, something like that. So and in fact, in all the examples you gave, that sort of enjoyment is a side. It's not here. It's not a question of that sort of enjoyment. It's always something else. And when I say that we have to do the same thing, it's in fact in reference to Spinoza, Aristotle, Plato, and so on, and all the experimentation of something like pleasure, joy, and so on, in an other sense, that's the sense of the power of the thing, the power of the obscure thing. And in our world, the question of enjoyment is not the question of joy, of pleasure, of enthusiasm, and so on. It's really the question of the power of the thing, of the obscure thing. And in fact, what is the definition of classical philosophy in a metaphoric sense? Classical philosophy is finally something like concept is much more fatherness than motherness. Concept is linked to the law, linked to the father, and we have to leave aside the obscure power of the body of the mother, something like that. And I don't agree with this beginning, naturally. But I think we have necessity to leave aside the obscure power of the thing and to find something else. And after that, to produce a new interpretation of the power of the thing.
Somebody says philosophy ultimately means there are things more interesting than sex.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. And wait, so it was. So I agree with you about the question of joy, the question of pleasure has always been a great philosophical question, and there is a multiplicity of determination of all that, certainly. And I have quoted Spinoza, in fact, and I don't remember the objection, the second objection.
That happiness must already be there if we decide.
Not only after.
Must be after, but also.
Yes. But in the case of enjoyment as the power of the thing, it's always in fact repetition. So we can find enjoyment because we know what it is. Certainly. So I agree with you, and it's a structure of repetition. It's also the problem. It's also the problem because our world, our absence of world, is a world of crude repetition. Because it's a mercantile activity, and the mercantile activity is, in its very essence, pure repetition. To sell, to buy, and so on.
Okay, faculty always can cut in, Vital.
The difference or difference that you
articulate with Nancy is massive, and I wish we had the time to read you both, like, focally right now. But we could maybe just provisionally and very quickly focus on the rewrite that you propose, or the translation into infinite thought, because that might be somewhere where I could ask you a very brief question, which would be where you might locate the death drive in your thinking of jouissance or pleasure, where, because I have the sense of the world that Nancy is driven beyond the pleasure principle as he tries to negotiate some of these topoi and themes that you bring up. So that would be one place perhaps to start trying to read you and refold the text together and see what kind of an infinite conversation they might want to elicit for us. But maybe that could be a very economic and brief place to start such a thing, where you locate in the twofold of your thought now, in the political scene and the scene of a possible sexuality, the death drive. That would be.
I think probably the more important point in your question is the question of infinite, finally. And the position of infinite in relation to enjoyment as a part of the thing, and in relation to the way of Nancy, which is really, I agree with you, a sort of negotiation with the principle of pleasure, something like that, and with always the will of Nancy to do not do concessions, two concessions to the principle of death, something like that, or to the principle of repetition. And the question of infinite is a very complex one when I discuss this question with Nancy, because he is always saying that what I name infinite is precisely what he names finite. So it's a very difficult question, because I don't agree with him finally, and it is why he's always saying that he's completely different from me and completely near me, in fact. And in the center of the discussion there is the relation between finite and infinite. And one time he said to me that a finite thought is precisely a non-finite thought, something like that, an unfinished thought. But the discussion, the precise discussion, probably is between unfinished and infinite, something like that. But it's a very technical discussion. But it's the very heart of the matter.
And what is your answer? The unfinished, it's a finished.
Yeah.
Is there anything finished in your definition? Maybe that's
anything. Is there anything finished?
yeah. Is there anything finished in your? What I said. Is anything infinite in the far? It's open to a development.
Yes, but when there is a difference between unfinished and infinite. It's an Hegelian difference, but it's a true difference. Because the question finally is the positivity of infinite, and not the unfinished character of being as such. So the question to Nancy, and the more general question to some Heideggerian, post-Heideggerian conception of love, for example, and of sexual enjoyment, and of experience, and of the world, and so on, is that they don't assume, really, in my conviction, a strictly affirmative conception of infinite.